Hey, Andre, I appreciate you being on, man. I get a lot of questions about ADU financing, about can I build an ADU? What should I do? What is an ADU, accessory dwelling unit? So maybe we can dive right in because you own an architectural firm that specializes in ADUs. I know you've done one for yourself. You've done a few for our clients. You're very popular and in demand in the Southern California area. And there's been a lot of laws that kind of positively affected us. So maybe you can just start with, telling the audience, this replay is going to go out to a couple thousand clients and realtors and a few people already watching live on Facebook. Maybe you can just explain for the general audience real quick, what is an ADU? And although we've got an audience kind of across the country, I think 90% of the people that be looking to do this are in Southern California. So maybe you could explain just kind of what it is and why it's important to our market.
Sure, yeah. ADUs it came about really, I think, this like housing shortage and needing more space for more people. So Los Angeles specifically has made it really like a friendly thing to do. They're encouraging more ADUs and more space for more rentals. And really what it allows you to do is if you're zoned in an area that used to be just for single family homes, you can do this for properties that are multifamily also, but one of the big things is if you had a property that's zoned for a single family, you can now add an additional unit to your property. And that's what this accessory is, right? It's accessory use to your main house. So as long as you have a main house, you either have a garage to convert or just space to add in an accessory dwelling unit, you can add one of these units. And it's really great because it adds a lot of flexibility to your property. And that just helps increase the density of housing without really increasing necessarily the scale of the built environment, depending on where these things are, because they're generally meant to be behind the main house. You can now do junior ADUs, so you can actually carve out a part of your existing home to create a junior ADU within your existing home, which you can do in addition to the accessory dwelling unit. So there's lots of ways that Los Angeles has made it pretty easy to add an accessory dwelling unit to your property.
Yeah, I remember like any contractor I've ever worked with, just the bane of their existence is working with the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, the city of Santa Monica, the city of Burbank, the city of Altadena, whatever. And in my mind, the accessory dwelling unit is kind of the classic garage conversion that we see a lot of in Northeast LA, where you and I work a lot. A lot of garage units chopped up into like accessory dwelling units, probably illegally. So can you talk a little bit, you mentioned garage units, you mentioned, carving out space within your own house, building something. Can you kind of describe the different classifications of ADUs, like where you can put these or how you can build them?
Yeah, sure. The majority, so the junior ADU is kind of a newer thing that we haven't done a lot of. The majority of what we do are garage conversions and then ground up new ADUs. And then there's a portion of converting a garage where we add to it also. Some people like keeping their garage, either they have an old car, or they have a classic car, or they like to keep their car in a garage. So we keep some of the garage and then we add an ADU to a second floor or expand sideways if there's enough room. But the conversions we do a lot of, and then some of the new ones. And the pro really is I think about a third of our clients are looking to host family members. There's a really large percentage of people that have parents that are aging, they're looking to retire. Our clients have had kids, and it's a great way to have this multi-generational family set up on a property where the grandparents can have their own space. They can, often ADUs we plan for aging in place, so you can age there, and if someone ends up needing a wheelchair or a walker, we've thought about that ahead of time. Things that they're usually first, they're one floor, one story in that case. So it's a really easy way for someone to come be with their family, help take care of the grandkids. The parents can take care of the grandparent, and it becomes like a really nice living ecosystem. There's another third that are hosting, they're renting to friends or friends of friends, where they have, they just want to have family, that kind of closer knit community, and they have friends living on the property. Sometimes it's a kid that's back from school, but it's a way to have family stay with them when they come to visit. And then there's another third that just rent it. that are just looking for that extra income. They know they can rent an ADU. They have a nice property with some yard, and the ADU often gets, when we think about an ADU in that manner, we often expand our scope of work to thinking about the exterior and the yard and how it's used, and we'll carve out some space for the ADU so they have a private patio or a private garden. So as a rental unit, they have a separate entrance and a separate path, and it's a great way to often cover like the mortgage or a large share of working at home. And then there's a smaller percentage. LA might be more toward this contingency, but some people just want a home studio, home office, and it's nice that having a guest stay there is kind of a nice backup, but they often use it as a home studio recording or an office too.
Yeah, I've got a client who, luckily, prior to the pandemic, he had built ADUs on the 4 properties that he owned. And he has an in-person business where they do like these, pack and play, indoor playgrounds for kids. His business has been decimated. Yeah. And luckily, the 4 ADUs he has on 2 houses and then 2 additional units out in Palm Springs, I mean, it's been keeping him afloat. It's been the difference between like making it or breaking it on the properties. So can you talk a little bit about the process, right? So let's say I have a house in Eagle Rock, California. I have a garage that's really just become a waste of space and storing, old craft supplies from 5 years ago when my wife was working in a nonprofit. I'm like, all right, honey, we need to turn this into some type of money-making activity. I'm going to call Andrei and start to get some ideas and some plans on converting this garage into something we can Airbnb for, $1,000 a month or a couple $100 a night or whatever the case may be. Where does my head need to start? And like, what's the process with you? Because whatever you charge, I'm sure you're worth your weight in gold, just so I don't have to deal with the freaking city of Los Angeles. But tell me what my thought process would be if I'm like, all right, I'm kind of just doing some exploratory work. Either I've got some money or I've got some equity in my house. I can refinance and pay for this. What would kind of the first steps be?
Yeah. So reaching out to us and getting us really to do, it's a little twofold. It's one, telling us what you're looking to get out of the ADU, and for us to do a site visit and look at your site conditions. It's a little bit of both. And if you don't yet know what you want out of the ADU, but you think it's a good idea, call us anyway. We'll help look at what if we're talking about just the garage conversion, we can look at what you might have to put into that garage to convert it. Sometimes, the garage wasn't necessarily built to code or wasn't built in a way where it would meet the standards of an ADU. So we often have to supplement the structure. Sometimes that means looking at the foundation, often reframing the walls. If we're going to put windows in, that's new framing. So there's an amount of work that has to go into the ADU to make it, into the garage to make it an ADU, right? To bring it up to code and make it a living environment. So depending on what you're looking out of that conversion, we can help guide you to say, this is going to be a $100,000 thing, or you're looking at like a $350,000 thing. We can help talk about what you want out of it and what we think is worth putting into it to help you get back what you're looking, the use, right, that you're looking out of it. But I feel like what client, and I was thinking about our meeting today and some ideas for people, and I feel like clients often think they have to have the larger amount of money for the project when they call us up. And really, when we start talking with a client, we're months out from really needing the bulk of the money, right? So even though, hiring an architect and the city permitting and the structural engineer and a site survey, like these are all amounts of money that you'll need up front, but it's a fraction of what the total cost is. So I often like to remind clients that there's like a project budget and then there's a construction budget. And the project budget includes construction budget and then our fees and all these soft costs. And for an ADU, you're looking at something in, it's in the 15 to 20,000 on the low end, up to 50,000 on the upper end. So, like somewhere in between $20,000 and $50,000 to get the ball rolling, surveys, design work, permitting, and a couple months time until you're really ready to start the construction and need the 100,000 or the 200,000, whatever it is for the actual project.
Got it. So if I'm thinking about doing this project, my mother-in-law is aging. So we're going to build a new structure, or like I said, the classic Airbnb. I just want a few extra bucks to help me pay my mortgage. I don't mind renting out my garage. If I'm going to do this correctly, I'm going to do it legally. I'm going to get all the permitting. There's probably, like you mentioned, $15,000 to $20,000 in exploratory fees to get the architectural plans, get the approval from the city, get everything ready to go before somebody's ready to start swinging a hammer. Is that correct? About 15 to 20 grand on the low side. If you're building a whole building, probably extensively more, right?
Yeah, and it depends. There's a large caveat because in LA we have these hillside areas, and if I need a survey done or a soil report, there's sort of there's some heavier items that information we need sometimes depending on the site. So that's why I give a range of like 20 to 50. Often it's 20 to 30, but there's some anomalies in weird sites out there that need more work.
If you're on a hillside, just assume everything's going to be twice as expensive.
Yeah, and there's also a much smaller number that if someone, I do this often with realtors, where someone's going to look at a property and they want to know if they can do what they want to do, or how much it's going to cost, or get an idea of what's involved in the scope of work before they buy a property. And so sometimes if we have a client in escrow, they're there and they're looking at something and they want to know, could they convert this garage to an ADU, or how much would it cost, or could they blow out this wall to connect this? Then we have a fee schedule set up for that. So, it's in the hundreds of dollars kind of thing. And I could come out and take a look, give a little report, or talk to someone about it.
Got it. So we'll call it a couple $1,000s, I could kind of get proof of concept on my garage conversion. On 15, 20, 25,000, I can get everything soup to nuts on the architectural plans and you managing the permitting process, probably even referring me to a contractor and whatnot. Yeah. And then we go into, contractor costs and the actual construction costs, which sadly, 3 years ago when we first started talking about this was probably significantly cheaper than they are today. So can you talk
a little bit about alone right now, right?
Plus cost of plywood insane. Can you talk a little bit, and I know you're not a contractor, but you work closely in that space. Can you talk a little bit about, what is kind of the scope of work, time frame, cost, materials, if I'm thinking about doing a simple 800 square foot garage conversion versus, okay, I've got a big plot of land in Altadena, I'm doing a ground up. I think you can do up to 1,000 square foot ADU, is that correct?
1,200.
1,200. Okay, cool. So maybe that 600 to 800 square foot garage conversion, the buildings are already there. There's not a ton of foundation work that needs to be done versus like, all right, this is going to be a place my mother-in-law and father-in-law are going to live out the rest of their life. I want to make it nice, 1,200 square foot, modern amenities. Could you talk a little bit about what that kind of range of cost could potentially be?
Yeah. So there's and I do work closely with contractors because I kind of feel like part of my job as an architect is that when a client hires us, they're hiring us as kind of a team. I become a member of the client's team, right? Like client's going to build something. Maybe they've never done this before. Maybe they have done this before, but one of the great reasons to hire an architect is that you have someone on your team now. And so I kind of advocate for the client during construction. If changes come up or they want to make changes or there's a question about cost or the process, that's a great reason to have an architect because we have relationships with the contractors. I know enough about construction that I can see something was done poorly, if it was done well. So if there's any questions during construction, I'm there to help make sure the process goes well. As far as cost, it's a pretty big range. On the lower end these days, it seems like $200, $250 a square foot. And it's depending on the hillside or the complexity of the site. And really the scope of work, it kind of goes up to $400, $450 a square foot, depending on what we're looking at. I'm currently seeing, it feels like if we were to do a straightforward garage conversion, and I sort of say like finishes that are nice, right? We're gonna you go a step up above Home Depot finishes. We're doing something that we're all kind of happy with and probably pretty proud with. Then the ADUs tend to be, I feel like in the $120,000 to $180,000 if we're trying to keep things like really simple and really clean and it's kind of very functional. And then some of the higher end design ADUs that we're doing right now are in the $300,000 to $400,000.
That makes sense. As you were talking, I was just looking on, hey, what is the going rate on Airbnb for just like, a one bedroom place, kind of a studio. And it
Yeah,
seems, Eagle Rock's kind of just the epicenter of some places you and I have worked. So it's like, if you want an individual room in an existing house, it's about 75 bucks a night. If you want like kind of what an ADU would be, a little studio, you're somewhere between 150 and $200 a night.
yeah,
And I've done some of this math. So if you're at about a 70% occupancy, so say 360 times 70% occupancy times $200 a night, after the Airbnb fees, the cleaning, let's assume they take 20% off the top, you're at about $40,000 a year in potential rental income
yeah,
managing this little ADU. And if you're saying you can build out a garage conversion for, $1.20 to $1.80, somewhere in there, your cost to recover all those funds is 3 to 4 years. And now you've got, $30,000 to $40,000 for the rest of your life, as a retirement fund, or
yeah.
paying off your mortgage early, or whatever the case may be. Is this kind of the thought process people are going through when they build it, or are most people getting in touch with you to build this for personal use, like we talked about the
Yeah.
in-laws, or I want a home studio?
Yeah, half and half. I mean, it's the people who, the families that have bought a home and are looking to do this are looking for, then it's more personal. They're not generally looking to rent it. It's, and some of them are thinking about the long-term value of their property too. Adding an ADU will, I mean, currently seems to be a great idea to add value to your home.
Right.
Anyone that's buying a home often seems to be thinking about, is there an ADU, or can I convert anything on the property to an ADU, right? Or can I build an ADU? It's always like, it seems like it's like the third question, right? Like, so it's definitely on everyone's mind.
Yeah, I know one of the biggest advertising things that I see when I look at listings in our market area, and like even if there's not an ADU, every smart realtor always tries to stage the garage with like
Yeah,
an office desk in there or something,
yeah,
because so many people are working at home post pandemic that they want that extra space to get
yeah,
away from the screaming kids and the dog and the distractions of Netflix and whatnot to go
yeah,
work. So my buddy Joe was mentioning, using airdna.co to calculate Airbnb potential rental income. AirDNA is an awesome website. You could get lost in there for hours finding
yeah,
what potential rental income is. And then, Joe asked, can an ADU be built using a renovation loan? Absolutely. I think most clients who are doing ADUs right now, they bought in Echo Park for 700,000 5 years ago. Now their house is worth $1,000,001.
yeah,
They're taking some cash out to finance this. As far as thinking through the financing, considering most people are probably just pulling this equity out of their house, how long between, okay, cool, Andre, I'm gonna give you $5,000, $10,000 to kind of start the exploratory work, versus, all right, I need to be paying people who are swinging hammers and like
yeah.
buying tile and stuff like that. So how long is like the permitting process? How long are you fighting with the city of LA and getting soil samples and all that fun stuff before the client actually needs the money? Because I've tried to warn clients, please, please, please get in touch with me before you break ground. I cannot tell you how many people call me and they're like, hey, I'm halfway through construction. The back side of my house is off and I need to take 100 grand cash out of my house. And I'm like, yeah, we don't lend on houses that are incomplete. So how long between that initial, you're kind of doing your exploratory stuff and people need the money to start swinging hammers?
Yeah. It's anywhere from, I would say conservatively, like 6 months to a year from when we sign up a job and start a contract and we start designing. We can be very quick with an ADU, and it really depends on the client and the site, and some of it's the site complexity and some of it's the client and how quick they are. But we do have a lot of clients that have jobs and have families, and it, as fast as I can move, I still need feedback from them, and then we have other jobs. So there's, generally speaking, when we start designing something, for us to also do a proper design, right? Like the reason you hire an architect, right, is because you're getting a product tailored for you, right? Like I'm going to go to the site and I'm going to talk to you about how you use it, where the sun moves, and is there a nice tree you want to frame with a window? Like you're getting something built and tailored for you. So design wise, it tends to take somewhere around 3 to 4 months. And then permitting is another 3 to 6 months. And there's a big range there because it depends on your site. If you're a hillside area or flat, if it's a flat lot, maybe it's 3 months. If I have to do some hillside area or Mount Washington has a design review board, it's going to be a lot more, many more months. So my ideal is that when I start designing, clients are thinking about talking to you. And when we go kind of from schematic design to design development, we usually have an idea of how much things are going to cost. Then I feel like it's a great time to talk to you, because then they can go and take out either as much money as they want, they can max things out. They can then worry about the financing while we're still designing and working on permitting, and you guys can get the paperwork together.
Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about, because I know LA made this easier to do. I know there was some talk about some of the restrictions, like sunsetting, or the city is famous for saying, yeah, do that. Oh wait, January 31st, we're changing this. You can't do it anymore. So what's the current, especially for like LA County, which is where most of my realtors and clients are, what's the current kind of legalities and the temperature of this? Is this going to go on in perpetuity, or is one day the state of California going to wake up and be like, no, we don't like ADUs?
Yeah, it seems very pro. I was going to actually have, you had mentioned, you used the word fighting when we're working with the city and fighting with the city. The city seems very willing to do ADUs. It seems like a very positive thing right now. So the city, it doesn't take time with the city right now because we're fighting with them. It takes time with the city just because they're totally understaffed and overused, right? Like overbooked, or with the inundated, right? They're inundated with ADUs, and then because of COVID, I used to be able to walk into the city, talk to a person, and I could get an over-the-counter permit, or I could, negotiate things, and I could talk to a person and we could solve an issue. I could get a permit way faster. Now I can't go in the building, so I have to drop drawings off. They get routed to someone, and the process is just taking longer than it should. So that's part of why I say permitting is 3 to 6 months. For some ground up work, it could take a year of permitting. But I do feel like it's a positive thing. I feel like people they're not looking to keep us from doing this. I think they're very happy to get the work done. It's just everyone's understaffed, so it takes time. But I think it's a good thing to do. I mean, I'm all for. I'm really for ADUs and kind of increasing that density without a lot of McMansions going up in neighborhoods that are out of scale. If I can slide a little comment in.
Yeah, no, I love it. Because I mean, this really does address a problem. Sadly, the government is always 2 steps and 10 years behind. They should have been encouraging ADUs a decade ago. We might not have the same rent issues and density problem. Is there any requirements for, because especially some of the areas we work in, Eagle Rock, Echo Park, Los Feliz, Mount Washington, not a whole lot in the way of parking in those areas.
Oh yeah.
Is there any requirements for parking, or how is the city mitigating that if all of a sudden a bunch of houses are doubling up on units and there already wasn't parking on the street? Is there any requirements, or are they okay with people taking away garages, since nobody in California actually parks their car in the garage anyway?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. People have I think the city has recognized that people don't really use their garages. So if you take a garage, you convert it to an ADU, you void your covered parking rule. So as long as you have parking on your site, we can still convert the garage and not add parking. And it almost always shakes out, because in order to get to the garage that was in the back of your house, you have to have a driveway. And in order to, the driveways, you can park 2 cars tandem lined up. So generally speaking, if there's a garage and we're converting it, and you also have to be within a half mile of public transportation, almost everybody is. There's almost always a bus line, or a smart car parking station. There's always some way to find some public transit, and then you void your covered parking, and we just use that driveway to say there's 2 spots, one in front of the other.
Awesome. And what are the things I'm forgetting about? I mean, we covered costs, we covered permitting. It's encouraging to hear that the city of LA is actually positive about something.
Yeah.
I know they're behind. I know realtors that I work with, they've got a bunch of new construction projects. They're just waiting for the final occupancy to come through. And same thing, it's like even the inspectors are getting frustrated, because they're like, well, I got to report to the city, but this lady hasn't been in the office for a year, and then we got to get this sign off. So it's just, things are delayed because they're still not working in person. But what are some of the questions I forgot to ask about ADUs in general? What are some things that like realtors or consumers need to
One really nice thing about the way the ADU ordinance is set up is that you don't have to create new utility hookups for the building. So you're allowed to tie in your electrical and your water from the existing house, which is really nice because that's a huge added cost. It could be a huge added cost, right? To run all new power lines and water and sewer. So that's great for ADUs. You don't have to connect all new utilities. Parking, the setbacks have been reduced for ADUs. They're now 4 feet for the rear and side. If you have a garage.
Can you explain what a setback is? Because
Yeah.
I know this in years past, before they were a little bit more bullish on ADUs, the setbacks killed a couple clients of mine that were thinking about building a second home on a lot or whatnot. So can you explain why that's important?
Yeah. And so the setbacks, so a setback is how far you have to keep something you're building from your property line. And there's different setback rules for different types of properties and different zones, different residential zones. So one of the things though we check when we come in to do a new house is we always look at the setbacks, and that becomes our maximum building envelope. With ADUs, the setbacks have become more lenient. Usually setbacks are 5 feet or 6 feet, depending on the height of a building. And there's some algorithms for hillside areas, but for ADUs, the city has decided you can do 4 feet from a side yard or 4 feet from a rear yard, whereas it used to be 15 feet from a rear yard. And if you have a garage that exists and is permitted, then you can stay within that envelope, even though it's up against a setback, where it's less than 4 feet. So in cases where we do a garage conversion and we stay within the building envelope, if it's non-conforming and it's somehow within the setbacks because it was permitted as a garage, we can stay within that envelope and we're fine. Anything we build outside of that has to go by the current code. So then it has to go by 4-foot setbacks, but it doesn't mean we have to remove any of the existing garage as long as it was permitted. So that's one confusing thing I think for clients is when they come in and they say, this existing thing doesn't have the required ADU requirements for setbacks, but if it was permitted, then it's okay. We can make it work.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember years ago, my wife and I were looking at a property in Altadena that had, what for California is a pretty big yard. And before the ADU setback rules, we were like, wait a minute, 15 feet from here and 15 feet from here. I'm like, we can build an 8-foot pool house.
Yeah, you'd end up with a sliver. Yeah.
Didn't make any sense.
Yeah, and we can also have attached ADUs. So you can have an ADU attached to your house. So if your garage is attached, or if you want to create a new ADU, and we have the space, if you have a big lot and you want to create a new ADU, you can have it attached to your house and separate from your garage. So depending on lot size, there's a lot of different options for how to make an ADU fit in your property.
So this would be like literally like framing out just some new rooms attached to your existing house, and then a side entrance for the Airbnb tenant or something like that. Yeah. I'm falling in love with this idea because I remember there's like 1 or 2 housing tracts in Valencia that are called next gen homes, and they're perfectly set up where you walk into a courtyard and there's like the main big tract housing, but over to your right there's a separate entrance with like a little mother-in-law suite, a kitchenette, a bathroom, a 1-car garage. So it's like you can either Airbnb it, which most people up there do not, or when I'm thinking about aging family living with us, my sister needing to stay, out of towners, it's so convenient. So any last thoughts in general about like people that want to start thinking about this? I put your website and contact information in the comments, and we'll make sure that this goes out when we send in the email blast. Kind of any last thoughts that we forgot to cover, or like first steps if people are thinking about getting serious about this?
Really, I think reach out to someone like me, to an architect or designer, right? Because there's a lot of possibilities that we see. Like I do this all the time. And so I can walk into a property and there's actually like, we've been doing it enough that I often, there's a few solutions that we see very quickly. And if someone hasn't ever done it before and you're wondering if you can do this and what's a load bearing wall, and you've got these questions about setbacks, that's why there's our profession, reach out and just ask some questions. I'm happy to talk to people. And figure out how to make projects work for people.
2 years, still haven't figured out how to
Yeah.
use Zoom. New to myself. I appreciate your time, Andre. I'll let everybody know where to find you. And yeah, I see you got a lot of projects going on your whiteboard there. Your black.
Yeah, man.
Congratulations, man.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks for being on. I appreciate you adding value to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, talk soon, my friend.
Oh yeah, take care. Bye. Bye.